Hello. We've just had the Mooncake Festival, a traditional Chinese festival celebrating the mid-autumn. We said before that there are many cultural symbols or codes that Chinese people love to refer to over and over again to describe certain scenarios or mood. For example, when we see river maple, 江风, we would know it's an expression for sadness. When we see willow, we would know it's about saying goodbye. This way of writing is not just for convenience, but also contains a far more profound message. It almost feels like these expressions bear all the weight and emotions passed down from generations through thousands of years, and in this way make the whole feeling more substantial. Moon is another favorite subject that Chinese poets loved. It's usually associated with missing one's hometown and families, because when the moon, especially a full moon, is high up in the sky, even though people are thousands of miles apart, they will be looking at the same moon at the same time and admire this same natural wonder. The very thought of this is actually deeply moving and dramatic. There have been countless poems on the subject of moon in Chinese poetry, the most famous one obviously being 静夜思 by Li Bai, which probably everybody who ever learns Tang Shi is able to recite. 床前明月光，疑是地上霜。举头望明月，低头思故乡。Today we will look at a poem by Du Fu. We know Li Bai and Du Fu are equally regarded as the greatest poets of all time in ancient Chinese poetry, but their styles are distinctively different. Li Bai is more free in his expression and tends to say what he wants to say more directly, like a big river flowing, roaring and rushing onwards without stopping. Like his 望庐山瀑布, we have 飞流直下3000尺，疑是银河落九天. He describes the magnificence of the waterfall head on and to the extreme, like his 静夜思, 举头望明月，低头思故乡. Again, very direct, nothing is hidden. So to a certain extent, this style is more approachable and easier to understand and appreciate. Du Fu, on the other hand, is far more subtle. His use of words are more carefully chosen, and his description of things have more substance quietly built in, and therefore are more profound and often have multi-layered meanings. This indirectness makes his poem sound somewhat plain at first sight, but the more carefully you study it, the more clues you will find, and you will realize eventually that the emotion that's embedded in his poems are equally strong and intense. For me, Du Fu's poem is more like a lake. On the surface, it's calm and peaceful, but it runs deep, and it has got a huge amount of water within. I hope we can use today's poem as an example to illustrate this point. Appreciation of Du Fu's works is usually an acquired taste, and I hope you will like them. The title is 月夜, very straightforward. 月 is moon, and 夜 is night. So it's about a night with a moon. This is a 五言律诗. We've seen one such format before by Bai Juyi, 赋得古原草送别, in which we have 野火烧不尽，春风吹又生, if you remember. It has 8 lines with 5 characters per line. Let's read it together first. 今夜鄜州月，闺中只独看。遥怜小儿女，未解忆长安。香雾云鬟湿，清辉玉臂寒。何时已虚晃，双照泪痕干。今夜 is tonight. Fuzhou is the name of a place, which is about 100 miles north of Chang'an, capital of the Tang Empire, currently day Xi'an. Gui means women's room, and Guizhong is inside the women's room. Zhi means only, Du means alone. Kan, usually we pronounce this as kan, but here for tonal reason, need to pronounce it as kan, as this sounds correct and better. It has the same meaning though to look at. This poem was written after Anshi 之乱, the Anshi rebellion broke out, and after Chang'an, the capital, fell to the control of the rebels. Du Fu had previously moved all his family from Chang'an to this Fuzhou, and he himself tried to follow the new emperor who had just ascended to the throne in further north. But unfortunately, he was captured by the rebels en route and sent back to Chang'an to be imprisoned. And this poem was written when he was still a captive in Chang'an. That night, he saw a moon in the sky, and he thought about his family, who were all in Fuzhou. He thought his family, in particular his wife, must be able to, and surely will, look at the same moon at Fuzhou and miss him, just like he was missing them. So this Guizhong was referring to his wife. His wife would be looking at the moon alone, all by herself, Du Kan, this year. As we see, this couplet is very plain and doesn't seem to be any special at first sight. But if we really look at it more attentively, we can gather a few more thoughts that were not put down on paper. First, Du Fu did not talk about himself, did not talk about he was missing his wife and children, but casually wrote about his imagination, that he imagined what his wife would be like at that time. What was she doing? She would be looking at the moon and missing him. Now this goes back to what I just said at the beginning. This kind of reference to the moon or to look at the moon is not just what's written on the surface, just to physically look at the moon, but also contains almost imperceptibly meanings of missing home. It's another example of the power and richness of these cultural codes. So Du Fu was actually saying, tonight, my wife must be missing me by herself alone. Which leads to a second thought, that is, in previous years, Du Fu must be with his wife looking at the moon together, but this year they were forced to be apart. And this added a very subtle sadness and helplessness in the poem. You see, the language is so ordinary, yet there are so many hidden messages. That's why we said Du Fu's poems really run deep. Now let's continue. At this point, there is a slight issue. We know Du Fu's whole family were now in Fuzhou, but why his wife, Du Kan? Just by herself? What about their children? The next two lines are still his imagination. He now imagined what his children would do at this time. Yao means far away. Lian means 怜爱, to have a loving sentiment towards someone or something. 小, little. Er is son, and Nu is daughter. So he was missing his little children with some endearing thoughts from far away. Well, he imagined they probably wouldn't be interested in joining their mother to look at the moon and to miss their father at this particular moment, or to miss the days when they were all still living in Chang'an. Why would I say so? Because Du Fu wrote, 未解忆长安. 未 is not yet. 解 means to understand. 忆 means to remember things from the past. Because his children at that time were still little, they wouldn't understand the significance of that time and wouldn't be capable of sharing the sadness of their mother about being apart from their father and not able to return to Chang'an. That light sadness from the first two lines have now grown thicker at this point. Du Fu was saying his wife would have to bear all this pain by herself alone at Fuzhou, and then indirectly saying he himself would have to likewise bear all this pain in Chang'an, being helpless. The next two lines are very beautiful. Still imagining, Du Fu turned all his missing thought and love into a poetic and romanticized description of what his wife would be looking at tonight. Wu is fog. 香 is some sweet smell. 环 is hair. 云环 is the shape of women's long hair when braided into certain patterns, and in general just refers to women's long hair. Because the hair is so long and dense, it looks like cloud, 云. So 云环. Shi is wet. So Du Fu imagined his wife was shrouded in the sweet fog, and her long hair would get wet from it. Why sweet? It's a romanticized way to say how graceful his wife is. And the next line, 清辉玉璧寒. Qing is clear, Hui is light, here referring to the moonlight. Yu is jade, and Bi is arm. Du Fu was comparing the arms of his wife to the jade, as they must be so clean and smooth and beautiful. Han is cold, so the poet was saying that his wife's white and smooth arms were like jade, and covered in the clear moonlight, they would grow cold. We can feel the intense emotion the poet had towards his wife, and that he poured all the emotions into these two lines. Yet he did not just say it bluntly, but instead showed how subtle and contained his feelings were, covered in a beautiful language. However, is this beautiful language equal to delight and happiness? No. Despite the description of an almost fairy-like woman, shedding all her beauty in the moonlight, somehow that thread of sadness and melancholy that started from the very beginning lingers, and we can feel the chill and coldness from such characters such as Shi, Qing, and Han. And why these characters could deliver such sad mood? Because the woman, Du Fu's wife, was alone by herself, separated from the poet, and has been like this under the moon for a long time, deep into the night. So in a way, no matter how beautiful and elegant she was, it was almost all irrelevant. So you see, throughout the poem, Du Fu was constantly referring to the fact that his wife was separated from him and he missed her so much. But he never directly revealed this. Instead, he chose many different angles, using his imaginations to guide himself and also the readers onto this subject. Now the motion has grown more and more intense, that Du Fu couldn't hold it any longer, and he uttered a sigh of wish, wishing one day he could reunite with his wife. But again, he didn't say it directly. He is which, what. Shi is time. Yi means to lean against. Huang is curtain. And Xu here means semi-transparent, as in Xu Huang, a veiled, semi-transparent curtain. So Du Fu was asking, which day can I or can we lean against the veiled curtain? To do what? Shuang is double, a pair of something. Zhao is to shine. Lei is tear. Hen is the remains or trails left by something. Gan is dry. This shuang implies that in his wish, the scene that he just described was about two people, i.e. he and his wife. So he was wishing one day both of them could be together, leaning against the veiled curtain and let the moonlight shine upon their face and dry up their tears. How deep and profound his emotions were, yet so subtle. He implied there were tears on both of their faces now because of the sadness from missing each other. It's magical, isn't it? While throughout the poem, Du Fu never explicitly said how much he missed his wife, in every line that theme was there, and it grew and grew and stayed with you. That's why I said Du Fu's style is very different from Li Bai, but his emotion is equally abundant. The more you read it, the more you can get out of it, especially those hidden messages, those hidden sentiment beyond words that are put down on paper. And hopefully the more you will love his poems. That's all for today. Thank you very much.